But does that mean I know everything? Absolutely not. If we're talking about TikTok, a 15-year-old will, dance around me probably, and know how to explain it a lot better.
Literally, probably
right?
dance. Yeah,
possibly. I'm doing the whole If you guys are watching the video, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not watching the video, well, you know what to do. Go on to YouTube.
Break your click, break the system, take your pick. Never put the game on hold if I can't get, don't fuck with my shit. Independent seas, independent split. Reap the benefits. Drop that, let it. But I'd rather sell a brick than work to build your house. My dependencies never fall upon waste use. Yet they slept on me, got a bus just to wake you.
Welcome to the My Creative Friends podcast, where me and a creative friend talk about creativity, life, wherever the flow really takes us. Today I'm joined by Jamie.
Hello.
Thanks for joining me, man.
Oh, thanks for inviting me.
Always.
All right.
Always, yeah. I think it always starts off with like a little bit of a bio. Tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got into this.
My bio. Okay, so how much time do we have here to record?
I think we have 30 minutes, so condense it. Yeah.
30 minutes. I'll do my best. I guess let's start right from the beginning. Born in Toronto, raised in Portugal. Came back to Toronto when I was about 19, I think. And since then, I've been dedicating myself to the creative stuff. So I've always been one of those kids that was always drawing, that was always doing, giving headaches to my mom, always drawing everywhere. And yeah, I was one of those kids. So when I came back to Canada, I got into Humber College, and I started taking some courses in graphic design and web design and all that fun stuff. And got myself some work at a local newspaper.
Okay.
And that's how I kind of started the whole creative design business. After that, I was at the newspaper for about 4 years, and then I decided to kind of start my own adventure. And this is now 16 years in the making.
16 years in the making. Wow. That was a really well summed up bio.
I know. It's like I've done this before.
Yeah. Wow.
And I forgot to mention, there's also a podcast in the mix there as well. And all new adventures and new things.
That's right. And that podcast is the Creative Spin podcast.
That's it.
Right. Which I've been on twice.
Yes.
Because I'm just such a great guest, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're getting yourself ready for a third time.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the podcast for a second.
Okay.
What was the main driver for you to start a podcast?
Okay. So, I mean, as you well know, podcasts are fun. So that's numero uno for why to start your podcast. Secondly, I mean, I have my own business. So Creative 7 is an agency that takes care of all the marketing stuff. I don't know why I was stumbling there, but I should know that part by, the whole idea of creating the podcast was really to bring more awareness to the things we actually go through in the business side of things, and to also talk to other creative people as well, and kind of bring in all of these, extra ideas and just views on creativity that can help other people that are in the same field, like yourself and anybody that's within that field. So, I did some radio when I was a little bit younger, even though not in English, it was in Portuguese.
Okay.
Which is my first language.
Fala português.
Português. So that was where I started with the whole radio audio experience there. So you always, once you do something like this, that little bug always stays there, right?
Okay.
It's always in the back of your head. And that's what kind of happened when it comes to then doing the podcast. I'm like, yeah, you know what? That's a perfect way to kind of continue the whole radio idea and the audio experience. So podcasting was definitely something that was coming up. I mean, as you well know, for the last few years, it's just been picking up like wildfire.
Yeah.
And I think that it is one of the best ways for you to get the word out. Of what you do, or kind of services you have, or kind of products you want to sell. I think it's one of the best ways to do it. on my end, on my podcast, I'm not so much trying to sell anything. I love having a conversation. I love learning from people. I try to bring in more creative people, like photographers or videographers, other designers, because I feel like we all have to learn a little bit with each other. And if you're just going to sit in your throne and think that you know it all and that you've done it all, I think that's the worst idea one can have. So my point is always bring in people to the podcast that I can learn from. I think that's my main focus.
Not sure why you've been bringing me on, but
well, you're young. You also got to get that young knowledge. Even though I still feel young. I mean, don't let the gray hair
He messaged me last week to play Warzone, so I think you're still doing all right. You're still doing all right.
I mean, when you get a 40-year-old guy going, yo, let's play fool with some Warzone. It's always a good thing, right?
Yeah.
My kids love it though.
Yeah. Right. The kids must love it because it's like, hey, new gadgets come to the place. There's
always new gadgets in this place.
Dad gets it. Dad gets it.
Oh yeah, still there.
So on the podcasting though, so the cool thing is, it sounds like it's a lot more of a. He was like, I want to do this because it's just really cool and fun and like you said, maybe educational in the sense that I can learn from every person.
Yeah.
It seems to be way more of that than it is like, hey, from a business sense, this is like the thing for me to do. You know what I mean? I'm sure it acts as a cool resource, especially when like demonstrating it to clients and stuff like that. But,
well, from a business perspective, you have to think is, you don't have to sell. Nobody likes to be sold anything, right? I mean, think about it, right? If somebody comes up to you and says, hey, are you interested? Or, those calls that you get, listen, we have a great deal. Nobody likes that stuff, right? So I treat this the exact same way. So what I think is, if you're knowledgeable in what you're saying and what you're doing on the podcast, I think people will pick that up and say, okay, you know what? I need somebody to do my podcast, or I need someone to do my video stuff. Jamie looks like he knows what he's talking about. Let me call him up. Let me ask him for some advice. And that's the extent of my business approach to it, I guess. And it's an advice to anybody out there that's thinking about doing a podcast to better their business, is try to give out more information, try to give out the knowledge, because the sales will come afterwards. If that's your goal, they will come in, right? If I'm listening to somebody talk about, whatever it may be, if they are knowledgeable, that will come through. So if I need that specific product or service that person is talking about, and I feel like, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about, I'm going to call that person up. So it will organically happen. It's much better than you trying to sell directly. Then it's going to sound like an advertising piece. Or just a regular ad on TV.
So let me ask you a question here now, transitioning a little bit, but staying on the topic of sales. So we were talking a little bit before the podcast, and sorry, we're laughing because you were just
learning a lot. I mean,
Jamie basically taught me like to have conversations before the podcast, and then you can reference it.
Well, I was trying to do something even a step further than just having a conversation. I was actually thinking about, if it was a morning podcast, to have like a breakfast with the guest, or a lunch or a dinner. That always works out much better, because then you get into other conversations. But this is your podcast. Go along, Michael. Just keep going.
Listen, so
I might take over, but let's keep going.
No, it's okay. We were talking about this very vaguely. Both of us we like to drive conversations.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's like hard for even for me now, like on the second time coming back, it's like when someone says something, you have 3 different topics that come up.
Yeah.
Right. And so like you're talking, I'm like, but I want to say this thing, I want to bring something up on sales though. We were talking about before about how I struggle a little bit with sales. That's more so my weakness. I tend to be a bit more, comfortable in the creative, but then when it comes to like, hey, here's my value, here's whatever, like that's where I struggle. So with someone who is maybe very creative and they want to turn it into a business, what are some small tips that you can give them if they're uncomfortable with sales?
Well, the main tip here is, if you want to do your own sales, which you should, I always advise that if you have your own company, you should be the one selling.
Okay.
There's nobody within your company that is going to know your product, your service, the way you know it, because it is yours. It was created by you, and you're the one doing that service or product or whatever. So nobody can sell like you. So you're not good at sales. You got to work on it. There's no two ways about it. Today, I'm sitting here and I'm telling you, I love being in a meeting with 10 people around me and doing that sales pitch. I feel comfortable in the meeting room and all of that. But the Jamie 16 years ago was in the same shoes that you're at right now. I used to dread it. I used to sweat. I used to stumble a lot. I didn't know how to get to read.
Because so it's something you developed.
You do develop it.
Okay.
You can. I think the development of it is really being at ease with the whole situation and stop overthinking it.
Okay.
Right? It's like swimming. The moment you put aside that fear of swimming, of water, then you start swimming. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like sales are the same thing. You just got to keep practicing doing it more and more and more. And put yourself into awkward situations. The more times you do that, the better you'll get. And try to think about, after you're done with that meeting, think, okay, what did I say that was right? What did I say that went wrong? You almost have to really understand the person that's in front of you and try to get into their heads and see, okay, is this person, are they responding well to what I'm saying? You got to know how to read people too. I mean, sales is not just only about what you're selling, but it's who you're selling it to.
Yeah.
Right? You can go with the same script to 10 different people and you're going to get 10 different reactions from them because they're 10 different people. And you don't know if that person that's sitting in front of you had a good day or a bad day.
Yeah.
If their kid was being annoying just before they got into that meeting, or you know what I mean? There's so many different factors to it. And you need to know how to read that. Mm-hmm. Once you start mastering that part, which is, you say something, but you're looking at the individual in front of you and you say, okay, he got that joke or he didn't get the joke. Then you switch and you mold that pitch.
Being able to adapt is really
you have
great.
to adapt, because let's say you have like this script in mind to sell the product and you have a little joke there right in the beginning, but boom, and there's zero reaction. It's cold. Nothing is happening. Well, that's when it's like you got to change. You got to mold a little bit. Probably you had 2 more jokes after that one. Don't use them.
Yeah,
because it's not going to work. You know what I mean? Then you got to go serious. You got to go into that zone, right? For me, it's hard, the joking part, because I always try to have fun in every single situation. And I think that in a sales pitch, that goes a long way, because you're going to get the person comfortable.
Yeah.
And I think that's my little secret, but I guess that's my personality. Not everybody's like that, right?
And you probably present yourself as a likable person when you do that too, right?
I'm just a likable person, period, Michael.
Well, I'm not saying you are likable. I'm saying you present yourself. I'm joking. No, you're good. You're good.
We're good.
So here's a question I had, actually. So you released your podcast both on video and on audio format.
Yes, right away.
Right away. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So where do you find that you get the most listening or viewership? Is it through the audio format or is it through the video format?
It's kind of like a mixed bag.
Okay.
It really depends on the episode and the topic and all of that. I still feel like we probably reach more people on the audio than the video side. And if you think about what a podcast is it's an audio thing. This whole let's do a video because we can thing came afterwards, and joining that, but we have to see it as, podcasts are still an audio thing. So you're going to have more listeners than you're going to have viewers. In some cases, some people are doing very good on video as well.
Right.
But it's still a harder sale, because it's not easy to keep people's attention for 20, 30, 40 minutes when it's just 2 people talking or 3 people talking, right? There's not a lot of action going on. That's why on a lot of the videos, we started incorporating some extra images and some extra stuff. But then you have to kind of gauge it and see, is it worth it? Putting so much work into a podcast on video if I'm not going to have as many viewers or listeners, you know what I mean? So it really depends on how many people you have as an audience, and you start gauging that. And again, this is different for everybody, right? Some people might have a podcast out there that they're doing really well on video, with it on video. So then, yeah, work a little bit more on the video aspect of it. But if it's working on audio, then work on the audio side of it, you know, extra little sound effects or whatever you want to put in there to make it sound a little bit better.
So there's usually a segment I do on the show called Behind the Snap. Now, you are not a photographer, although you do enjoy photography.
I'm an amateur photographer. I've now gotten myself used to saying that.
Yeah.
Because I have been taking pictures for 20 plus years.
Okay.
I should be much, much better at photography than I am. But it's just been one of those things. If you ask my wife, there's always a camera anywhere we go. Mm-hmm. Like I always bring 1 or 2 cameras with me. It's just been one of those things. But what's the question behind the snap? What is it?
Well, okay, so behind the snap is usually I show my 3 favorite photos.
Okay.
Of that the person has taken or has been in, as if they're a model, and I say, give me some context. Now, I understand that you are a photographer, passionate, but you know, I don't have access to your portfolio, unfortunately, so I couldn't do that. But I did want to highlight 3 of my favorite podcasts.
Okay.
And then just ask a couple questions from there.
Sure. Shoot.
The first one I wanted to bring up, this one was incredible, actually. So I listened to this one. I was in the car. I was driving down, and it was the Anthony Sima. Okay, so really interesting episode. I found the flow of the convo was really nice. I found myself just being very appreciative, I guess.
Yeah.
How do you prepare for the interview? You know, when it's something a bit different, because usually it's like, oh, this person is a photographer, it's easy. Do you prepare yourself a little bit differently when it's like the questions are going to be a bit more around like, hey, how your life has developed since this tragedy happened, whatever?
So with that episode in particular, I feel like that was one of my best episodes.
Yeah.
Because I think it really got me thinking about life, you know, and I think the feedback from that episode was kind of all within that same realm. How did I prepare? It's the same way I prepare for any other podcast. I don't like going just into a podcast not knowing anything about who I'm talking to, right?
Yeah.
I usually, like to dive into to see what they're all about and all of that. In this particular case, Anthony, he actually reached out to me.
Oh, okay.
He had seen a previous podcast from that I had done with a mutual friend from Fade Room Barbershop, and that's how he found out about my podcast. And then he reached out. He had obviously right from the get-go, his story is compelling, right?
Yeah.
He reached out and he said, listen, I don't know if you want to talk about this, but this is what happened to me. I was young, I had an accident, and now I'm stuck in a wheelchair. And
yeah,
when I got that message, I'm like, man, yeah, I want to talk to you. I want to listen to your story. I want to find out what it's all about and what happened and how you're dealing with it. And this guy, he's young. I mean, I think now he's 25. And to have something like this happen to you at such a young age, it's mind-boggling. You really have to pull yourself out of all the negative things that might be crossing through your head, and to do what he does and to be as positive as he is nowadays it's humbling to see that. And it got me thinking about my life. And sometimes when or anybody's life, when we're like, my life isn't going right because this and this happened, it's so minuscule compared to what Anthony had to go through, right? That you have to really step back and go, okay, you know what? Yeah, it sucks. Whatever's happening, it sucks, but it's not that bad.
Yeah.
And we can get over it and we'll figure it out. And there's always a positive side to everything in life. And that's one of the key messages that I got from that podcast and talking to him. But how do I prepare? I like having conversations, and we've spoken about this before, right? I don't see a podcast like a podcast. My goal in every single podcast that I do is to forget that we have these things in front of us, and there are cameras recording us. I want that has to kind of disappear. And for me, the goal is to have a conversation.
Yeah.
So when I bring in a guest, I want to know a little bit about them, but I at the same time, I don't want to know too much.
You want to learn on.
I want to learn because when I'm asking the question and I get that answer, there's a follow-up question to that answer. You know what I mean? It's like that's how a conversation evolves. So if you have too many questions set and question 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't feel like that becomes an interview and not a conversation. I don't know if I'm making I know what you sense.
Mean. Yeah.
But I rather have the conversation. I think it flows better. I think people that are listening to the conversation feel like they're there. And that's, I want my audience to feel like they're the third person in the room.
Yeah. So it doesn't really matter who you're really talking to.
It doesn't matter.
Well, does that change if you have like Gary V in the chair? Or is that, or maybe not?
And I've been fortunate enough to have conversation with Gary V. Not a very long one, because obviously he's a busy man and he's got a million different things to do. At the time, I didn't have the podcast, so I didn't record a podcast. I did actually go to the recording of the 100th episode of his show. That's how I got to meet him in person. But if I were to sit down and have him as a guest, well, first of all, Gary Vee, I've been following him for
so you already have a lot of material.
I know a lot of the stuff that he talks about. So, and you know what? It's interesting that I'm saying this because when I did meet him in person, I didn't have any questions to ask him. You know how when you meet somebody, you always have like all these questions prepared. Oh, I wanted to ask you this and I wanted to ask you that. Because I had been following him for a few years, and his message is pretty much the same. It's focused. He stays in his lane and he does his stuff, and he talks about business. He talks about what he loves, and that's it. Yeah. Right. So I knew everything that he has to say to the point that I didn't have any questions. It's kind of crazy. Oh, you'll have Gary V in front of you. What am I going to ask him? I don't know, man. First of all, we're basically the same age. I think he's a year older than me, right?
Okay.
Obviously, he's achieved a certain amount of success that I obviously haven't. But
he doesn't have this basement. This basement's pretty cool.
The studio is
pretty
kick-ass,
man.
But but my bottom line is like the life in terms of life experience, we've had the same amount of years of life experience, right? And being in business and doing all that. Mind you, he's done certain things differently than I have, but there's not much you can ask. You've already listened to all his shows and podcasts and all of that. What are you going to ask the guy?
Especially because he's so transparent about everything.
But mind you, he is exactly the same in person as he is on the videos and all of that. A lot of people ask and say, oh, he's this guy and he's that, but he's exactly the same thing. Yeah, it's quite humbling, actually.
It would be crazy if he wasn't, because like to develop this big personality like he has, right? But
you know what? It's him. Yeah, like that's the thing that a lot of people think it's an act and all of that, but it's not an act. It's the way he is, and I think because he's so genuine and he's so upfront with everything that he says, I think that's why he is the Gary Vee that we know and cherish.
Okay, so I'm gonna bring up another one: graphic designer versus mind reader. So this was a fun one.
Yeah,
this is a fun one. How much time do you spend mind reading versus being a graphic designer?
Well, it's crazy. I've been a graphic designer now for 20 plus years. And one thing that I can tell all you youngsters out there is that
careful, don't pull a hip. Come on.
is that you'll always have to be the mind reader. There's no matter how much you think you've learned, no matter how much you think you know, you're always going to get that one client that's going to be, throwing you a curveball. And you never know what to expect from a client. As much as you can mind read, as much as you can think what the person has in their head, in their mind, what vision they want for whatever you're designing for them, you just never know. It happened to me yesterday. I was just doing a simple poster for a client, and I designed it and I thought, yeah, this looks good. This looks great. And then the client turns around and goes, I didn't like this. I didn't like that. And I'm not going to get offended by that. I'm going to go, okay, that's cool. That's because everybody has their own views on things. Yeah. So you need to be humble enough to say, listen, I've been doing this for 20 years, but what's going to work for the client needs to work for the client. And they know their market better than we do, right? We can suggest as designers the guidelines. No, you know what? This is how you should be doing that. Obviously, if something is really wrong, you should advise your client. Yeah. Listen, in terms of design, that's not the best approach for it. Mm-hmm. It might not be the best way to put out the message. But if the client wants it a certain way for whatever reason it is, my take on that is the client is always right.
I've learned that the wrong way as well, unfortunately. Yeah. You brought up a good point, though, actually. So your intro to graphic design was, like you mentioned in your bio, like you just love to draw. Yeah. Right? And so when you have that love for it, that passion for it, right? Did you find it hard when you started to create a business around it and you similar situation that you just brought up, except 20 years ago, right? And you're like, okay, this is perfect. I love it. I'm in love with this logo. And then the person goes, this is wrong. I don't like this, whatever. Did you find it hard to get over that separation of like personal and business when you got started?
Yeah, and it's a learning process, and it goes back to one of your first questions, which is selling. Yeah. I think as a designer, you have to be a good salesperson too. So half of the acceptance from the client side comes from how well you can pitch that logo, right? So a lot of times you don't just create something for the sake of creating. It needs to make sense, right? So you need to have your story down to why you designed it the way you designed it, right? There has to be a reason why. Because if you just design a logo because it looks good, I mean, you're just that for me is a project you do on the side. You know what I mean? Yeah. You need to you need to look at the business. You need to see what the back end story of it, what it is, so that you can then create the logo. And then how you sell it is you go to the client and you say, listen, I have these 3 examples of a logo. This one I created with these colors and these shapes because I think that it goes well with this, this, and this. And you go the same way with the other options. You need to sell it. You need to make the client also understand why it's like that. I've had clients accept the first draft of a logo, which is essentially me grabbing the pencil and just, when you're just trying to...
Just
doodling something. Yeah. And the idea is just more or less like this. And the client goes, yep, that's it. You got it. Put some color into it and you're good to go. And they go, okay, sold. And
here's my bill.
And then there's the other client that you will do 10 versions of their logo and they won't like any of them. So they will know what they don't like, but they will never be able to tell you what they like.
Okay. So our podcast together, our first podcast together, there was a really big focus on authenticity. We talked about that a lot. I remember when I was making videos growing up, and I struggled with even knowing who I was or what I found funny or what kind of content I really wanted to make. And it was just a lot of me just being like, oh, Philip DeFranco's cool. I want to make a news show. And then doing a couple episodes of that and then me doing something else, right? So if you're like, even if you're like early teens and you're like, I want to start making YouTube because I think it's cool and I like the idea of it, but there's some people are still discovering who they are and what they find funny, whatever. Yeah. How do you be authentic when approaching content that way?
You're not going to. That's the bottom line.
I was not expecting that answer.
You're not going to. You're not going to be because you're going to find your authenticity after you've experienced your life, right? And that can take a year, that can take 10 years. Yeah. Everybody's different in that aspect, right? But usually people are going to be the sum of the people that they admire. So we just spoke about Gary Vee and all of that. Like if you're fully into Gary Vee, you're going to have that kind of personality, because now all of a sudden you know what he's talking about, you know what he's saying, and you become Gary Vee, and you're going to start wearing a beanie and
AirPods,
and swearing all the time and all. It's just going to be who you are because you admire that person. And a lot of people see it as copying. I see it as it's not so much a copying, but it kind of like it gets imprinted in your brain. And like it or not, you're going to start being like that person. But then you're going to move on to the next person, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So towards the end, this is what I mean. It's a process.
Yeah.
I think everybody isn't authentic when they start, because they're going to try to be the person that they admire. That, you know, when we're talking about podcasts or YouTube, so the favorite podcast or the favorite YouTuber, you're going to look and talk and try to be like them because that's who you admire.
Yeah.
There's no getting away from that. I think what's going to happen is, as you progress and as you become more comfortable with yourself, you're going to automatically be more authentic because you're going to be yourself.
Yeah.
The issue when you start is that you're too afraid and overthinking about everything that's going on around you. So you default into what you know.
Yeah.
What you know is what you've been seeing or listening to. So you're going to default into that because you feel like, oh, if I do it like this guy, then I'll be safe. Right? If your dad's like that kind of dad that's always with you and you know, playing soccer with you and what, you're going to eventually get his ways of
the things you appreciated that your father did, you wanted to.
Exactly, right? And that happens with anything. Any people, like even us here, you are probably going to learn a little bit from me. I'm going to learn a little bit from you. This happens across the board. And I hate when people say, oh, because I'm younger and you're older, I'm going to learn from you. Bullshit. I'm not going to swear.
Oh, it's okay. You can totally curse on this.
All right, I know. I think everybody learns from everybody. That's my bottom line, right? I know I'm 43. I want to learn from a 60-year-old, a 40-year-old, a 20-year-old, a 16-year-old. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Everybody brings something to the table.
Different perspectives.
Now, will I have more life experience than the 15-year-old? For sure, right? But does that mean I know everything? Absolutely not. If we're talking about TikTok, a 15-year-old will, dance around me probably. And know how to explain it a lot better.
Literally, probably,
right?
Dance, yeah.
Possibly, I'm doing the whole if you guys are watching the video, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not watching the video, well, you know what to do. Go on to YouTube. But it's about, life is about learning from everybody around you, and I know I'm giving you the old man speech, but it is true though. Like I'm now at that age, being in my 40s. I remember clearly being in my early 20s, right? And I remember clearly telling the 40-year-old guys, you don't know what you're talking about. What are you talking about? Nah, that's never going to happen to me. I know what I'm doing. And then I realized as the years go by that, those guys were right. They knew a few things, times are a little bit different, but the core, that core lesson,
the core message of what they're saying. Yeah.
That's still valid and still there. So for all the younger crowd that might be watching or listening to this, don't just disregard what your parents are saying or what your older guy is saying. Filter it. That's my advice, is filter it and make use of that the best way you can for yourself, but don't disregard 100% because the experience is there. Yeah. And that's going to be so valid for you. So much value.
That's a good piece of advice. Maybe like you said, maybe like it's, you listen to it and you just try to get down to the core of what they're trying to say. Yeah. Right? Well, and I feel like a lot of kids are like, you don't get it, man, mom. Like, books aren't in anymore. We're on Kindles or whatever. And it's like, no, but like read, It's
but the core is there. The reading part is there, right? Yeah. And I think that was, all those lessons that you always hear the older guys, oh, man, it's so boring. What is he? He doesn't get it. But there's a core value in there. And that's what I'm what I always say to my kids right now.
Yeah.
And they probably are on the other hand going, my dad, he just keeps on going. Like, I'm so boring, this old guy. But I know that I say it anyways, because I know that in 10 years from now, they're going to remember that conversation and they're going to say, holy cow, my dad was actually saying this before and he was right.
It's a great answer.
All right. Thank you.
Great answer. Good podcast. Thank you for being on, James.
No, man. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
No,
it's
great.
It was great. It was good energy, man.
Yeah. It was weird being on this side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay. I was weirdly comfortable answering questions this time around.
That's good. That's good. This has been the My Creative Friends podcast. I had Jamie on again. Very, very fortunate to have him on. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Leave a comment if you have a question for Jamie.
Yeah.
And don't forget to check out the Creative Spin podcast. It is it's close to being as good as this show.
Yeah,
it's like up there. It's up there. No, it's a good show. It's a good show.
Bashing your guests. What is going on?
You're right.
Here?
I should add in the voice note after.
Oh my God. Like, that's it. I'm leaving.
This is your house.
Okay, you leave.
This is your home studio, man. Okay. I will get out of here before you kill me. Thank you again for being on, and thank you for watching. Catch you on the next one.
Break your click, break the system, take your pick. Never put the game on hold if I can't get, don't fuck with my shit. Independent seas, independent slit. Reap the benefits. Drop that, let it.